discover the incredible journey of a broken immigrant who transformed nothing into an empire. And Alejandro stood at the corner of Maplewood, the chill of dawn biting his skin as he tucked his worn jacket tighter around him. With 3 jobs to juggle, every morning felt like a marathon. Offices first, his heart racing as he scrubbed floors, hoping to wash away the ghosts of a war-torn homeland. Each stroke of the mop reminded him of Reason, his 2 young children, eyes wide with dreams yet untouched by the world's cruelty. But in this small Midwestern town, whispers followed him like shadows. Glares pierced his back as if he were an unwelcome spirit haunting their streets. Why are they here? They'd murmur, their judgment swirling around him, suffocating his spirit. Each day, the weight of their expectations pressed harder against his chest. Yet he pushed through, illustrating the American dream with every ounce of his being. One afternoon, while catching his breath on the steps of an abandoned building, Alejandro's gaze landed on a derelict restaurant. Its cracked sign spoke of lost potential, a story waiting to unfold. An idea ignited a family-owned eatery that could serve not just food, but hope. This place could bridge the divide, offering a taste of home to hungry souls. With shaky hands, he shared his vision with his wife, Maria, hope lighting his eyes. "We can do this," he urged, drawing sketches in the dust with his finger. Yet his excitement clashed against her fears. "Alejandro, we can't risk what little we have. What if we fail?" Her voice quivered, balancing the dreams of their children against the harsh reality of uncertainty. Their children, nestled between 2 worlds, listened wide-eyed. They wanted to believe, yet echoed their mother's anxieties, caught in a tug-of-war between 2 hopes. As Alejandro began restoring the old restaurant, he stumbled upon boxes filled with letters from a father he had never known, revealing family secrets that turned his perception of success on its head. Did triumph lie in the sense of belonging, the warmth of family, or was it material wealth? Just as hope surged, an economic downturn crashed over Maplewood. Businesses shuttered, including his budding restaurant. The devastation struck hard as he looked around. Once skeptical faces now mirrored his despair. He felt a deep urgency rising in his chest. These people, once his critics, faced the same challenge he had long fought through. Determined, Alejandro organized a community gathering, urging everyone to set aside their biases and unite. A restless murmur swept through the crowd, the tension thick as he faced off against the town's most vocal detractor, a man whose glare could pin a person to the ground. Would they see the truth behind their fears? Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Standing before the crowd, Alejandro felt his heart pound, torn between the yearning for acceptance and the betrayal of old doubts. The faces of his family, lit with fear and hope, anchored him. Would this moment be one of redemption or rejection? Could their struggles unite them, twisting shared pain into a collective strength? As their eyes met, Alejandro took a deep breath, ready to confront his biggest challenge yet. As Alejandro looked into the sea of faces, he felt the weight of their gaze pressing down on him. Silence enveloped the gathering, a thick cloud of anticipation. With hands trembling but steadfast, he stepped forward, channeling all the courage he could muster. "Listen to me," he began, his voice steady, yet quivering with emotion. "I know I'm not from here. I come from a land filled with pain, where dreams often die under the weight of war. But here we have the chance to build something better. Together." Whispers flickered like quick flashes of lightning in the crowd. Doubt hung heavy, as palpable as the damp air around them. Alejandro glimpsed the man who had been most vocal against him, resentment rippling from his furrowed brow. But Alejandro pressed on, recalling every brush of shame he felt while scrubbing floors, every sacrifice he had made for his children's future. The restaurant may seem like just bricks and mortar. He continued, gesturing towards the empty building behind him. It's more than that. It's a reminder that we can rise together, regardless of our pasts. Each meal served can be an invitation to understand one another, to find common ground. He let his words settle, allowing the weight of his message to sink in. Hope stirred slowly in a few faces, and children shifted in their seats, nudging their parents as wonder took root in the air. Maria, arms crossed tight, watched with a careful mixture of pride and fear, her heart echoing Alejandro's. Could he really pull this off? And then there was a shift. One of the older women in the crowd, who Alejandro hadn't expected to find smiling back at him, spoke up. What do you need? Her voice was soft but firm, cutting through the tension with unexpected warmth. That moment, the air seemed to spark. Others began to chime in, eager to contribute. I can help with lighting, said a man from the back. I've got some tools, another added, stepping forward. Soon, what had been a group of divided opinions morphed into a gathering of possible allies. Souls bound together by curiosity, and a hint of longing for connection, something Alejandro hadn't quite dared to dream. As the tension evaporated, Alejandro's heart soared. Still, shadows lingered. The critic in the crowd, arms crossed tightly, glowered. But what's your plan? Words don't feed families, he scoffed. His words an icy reminder of the uphill battle still ahead. Alejandro felt the heat of doubt rising again but fought to keep his composure. I'll show you, he replied, meeting the man's steely gaze. I have ideas, recipes that carry stories. We'll use what we have and we'll build this together. I'll give every ounce of my energy if you'll grant me your trust. The response from the crowd was a ripple of intrigue and excitement. This was no longer just Alejandro's dream. It was becoming theirs, too. Just as Alejandro's spirit soared with promise, a loud crash echoed from the back of the crowd, the sound of a door bursting open. Eyes turned to see a group of newcomers enter, faces drawn with concern. Their clothes were rumpled, emotionally burdened, as if just stepped from a horror scene. Alejandro's heart sank. What could they possibly be bringing with them? With uncertainty growing thicker, Alejandro's gut twisted in anticipation. Moments like this could shift everything. Did they bring news of a greater crisis? Or could they be the missing piece he hadn't even known he needed? As tension hung in the air, Alejandro prepared to face whatever was to come next. The newcomers stumbled into the makeshift gathering, their presence striking a jarring chord against the hopeful spark Alejandro had ignited. Instinctively, a hush fell, as if the air had thickened with tension and curiosity. Each face reflected concern, some with tears glinting in their eyes, others with furrowed brows etched in fear. One man, slightly taller than the others, stepped forward, wiping sweat from his brow. We're running from a fire, he said, voice a mix of urgency and despair. Not a fire like you'd think. One raging through our village. There's chaos over there. Buildings collapsing, families torn apart. We barely made it here with our lives. Alejandro's heart sank further, an ache pooling in his chest. Images of tragedy danced behind his closed eyes, people he knew, lives disrupted by the kind of madness he had escaped. The crowd shifted as more whispers arose, concern rippling through the air like a breeze before a storm. And we have no place to go, the man continued, glancing back at the group behind him. We were told there might be a community here, a family guiding one another. We need help, shelter, food, anything. Alejandro's mind raced. Their dilemma echoed his own. And yet, in this moment, he felt the tug of his own ambitions. He could offer them something. Perhaps in helping them, he could solidify that bond he craved with the people around him, a sense of belonging that transcended words. A wave of voices erupted in the crowd. We can feed them, shouted an older woman, her eyes flashing with determination. I can make some soup. Others chimed in, springing to life with renewed energy as if compelled by some invisible force. But the critic, the man who had doubted Alejandro, stood tall, glaring between the newcomers and Alejandro. His jaw clenched. And how will we care for them while building your dream? We have our own families to feed, he snapped, the vulnerability of his own situation laced with harshness. Alejandro felt the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders again. His own dreams weighed against the desperate needs of these newcomers and those watching closely. Every instinct told him to back down, to shield himself from more chaos. But every beat of his heart reminded him of the sacrifices he'd made every family member he had lost to the unbearable burdens of life. "We can do both," he declared, his voice steady but his pulse racing. "Building the restaurant isn't just about food, it's about community. We can open our doors wide enough for both the hungry and the lost. A meal shared, a story told, it can bring us together, help them feel welcome." Some faces in the crowd nodded. Alejandro caught Maria's gaze, a spark of pride in her eyes, but also a trace of worry. The critics were still there, their skepticism palpable. Yet, slowly, the tide turned, and a shift began. Hope flashed brighter in that space as a few began to raise their voices in agreement. "I have blankets we can share. I'll cook extra for them," they called, forming a tapestry of support, woven tightly together as years of division began to unravel. But as the gathering buzzed to life again, Alejandro's heart twisted with uncertainty. This new burden weighed heavily, and he questioned his own resolve. Could they truly be the solution for one another? Suddenly, the tall man spoke again, his voice trembling with emotion. "Our village didn't just burn. Our families did what they could to protect each other. That's why we're here, to find our way back to hope." The realization hit Alejandro like a wave. The community he yearned to create wasn't just about a restaurant. It was a sanctuary for their stories, their struggles. He met the newcomer's gaze, sharing a moment of understanding, a silent promise that would seal their fates together. They prepared to take those first steps towards something beautiful amid the ashes of their lives. A soft voice spoke from the rear again. "But what happens next? Will we just be picking up the pieces? Or can we truly transform everything?" The question echoed, dangling heavy in the air, hanging between hope and despair. And Alejandro, feeling the weight of their trust, realized it was up to him to find the answer. As Alejandro stood in that fragile moment, surrounded by worried faces and palpable tension, a renewed sense of purpose washed over him. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs with courage. The skepticism in the crowd still flickered like a candle's flame, but he could feel the warmth of newfound hope pushing against the darkness. "Look," he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We've all faced our battles, haven't we? Each of us carries a story so heavy that without community, it's easy to crumble. But together we can build something that holds us up. A place where every story matters and every person is valued." Maria stepped closer, the light from a nearby lantern illuminating her face. "Yes, right," she chimed in, her voice soft yet strong. "We're not just talking about a restaurant, we're creating a home, a refuge. We can help one another heal, if we choose to embrace this struggle together." Alejandro studied the crowd, watching as hesitant faces began to soften under a wave of determination. The critic's spine seemed to relax a fraction, though his eyes still surveyed the situation with doubt. Others shifted uncomfortably, but a small group began to murmur their support. "How do we start?" someone asked, the words resonating like a collective heartbeat. "First," Alejandro said, buoyed by the spark of initiative, "let us gather all the resources we can. We need food, clothes, blankets, anything to support those who come to us. Next, we can share our skills. Some of us can cook, others can help with logistics. And for those willing, we can teach these newcomers what it means to be part of our community." He felt the weight of their gaze and pushed through the uncertainty. "Let us form small groups. Those who speak the newcomers' language can act as guides. We can create a plan that allows us to sustain all our families while giving a hand to those stepping into the unknown." The crowd started buzzing with ideas, voices blending into a hopeful symphony. A man stepped forward, looking like he'd carried mountains on his shoulders before. "I can show them how to garden. We can grow our own food. It's a way to be self-sufficient and empowered." Laughter broke through the tension. The critic, still frowning, crossed his arms but seemed to be reeling from the momentum. "You think this will work? Just magic away our worries?" he retorted, but a hint of doubt edged his voice. Alejandro couldn't help but smile, even at the man's sarcasm. "It won't be magic. It's gonna take work, heart," and he paused, locking eyes with the critic. "Trust. Trust that we won't lose our footing just because we extend our hands to others." The atmosphere shifted. There was laughter mingled with apprehension, an odd mix of fear and excitement. Faces began to light up with possibilities, and Alejandro felt their hearts beating faster. Together, in the rhythm of a community awakening, as plans began forming in fits and starts, a realization struck him. Hope was not just a word tossed into the air. It was the promise etched in each person's expression. Every small act of care. For the first time, he could envision the restaurant not simply as a building of bricks and mortar, but as a vibrant space pulsing with life, laughter, and stories that might have otherwise been silenced. And then, as he prepared to rally the crowd once more, a shadow flickered beyond the gathering. Smoke rose faintly in the distance, tainting the horizon. The once brimming optimism now mingled with dread, reminding him that outside their safe haven, danger still lurked. "What's happening?" someone gasped, their voice breaking the moment of tenderness. "Is that another fire?" The air felt charged as all eyes turned toward the rising plume. A sense of urgency surged through Alejandro. Could they rally together one more time? Could their combined strength withstand yet another impending storm? As hope clashed with fear, Alejandro found himself standing on a precipice. The next step would determine if they could protect everything they had begun to forge together, or if they would have to start again yet another time. The tension in the air thickened as Alejandro's heart raced. Smoke spiraled upward, a twisting omen against the fading sunlight. It reminded him of the fires that had ravaged their neighborhood before, fires that had consumed homes and dreams. He could almost hear the crackling, feel the heat on his skin. "Please!" a voice cried out from the back of the crowd, urgency pressing through the words. What if it's the newcomers? What if their arrival has already brought trouble? That fear spread like wildfire, igniting a chorus of apprehensions. "What are we going to do?" someone else asked, voice rising in desperation. Maria stepped forward, her demeanor fiercely resolute despite the anxiety swirling around them. "We need to find out what's happening. We can't just stand here." Alejandro nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Let us split up. If we can gather information, assess the situation, we can act before it's too late." The crowd hesitated, but then nods of agreement rippled through. Fueled by anger and anxiety, small groups began to form, ready to act. Alejandro took a deep breath and organized them quickly. They had no time to lose. "Maria, you take a group north toward the smoke. I'll head south with the others. We'll meet back here in 30 minutes. Without waiting for another word, he turned and walked briskly, the urgency of their task pulling him forward. The familiar streets turned foreign under this new weight of fear. Shadows danced along the sidewalks, but he pushed through the knot of worry tightening in his chest. They had come so far. They had built a fragile sanctuary. As they approached the source of the smoke, a faint orange glow began to materialize against the encroaching darkness. The air grew heavy with the scent of burning wood and something else, something acrid that turned his stomach. Alejandro pressed on, driven by the dread of what they might find. He caught glimpses of neighborhood inhabitants hustling back toward their homes, distressed faces reflecting his own mounting concern. "What's happening?" he called out, but shouts of panic drowned his voice. The closeness of uncertainty began to feel suffocating. Finally, they reached the edge of a small park where the flames licked hungrily at dry brush. A group of men stood there, trying to extinguish the fire but clearly overwhelmed. It wasn't the newcomers. It was an old, abandoned lot, set ablaze by an unknown nemesis. Anger bubbled within him. Someone, somewhere was fanning the flames of their fears. "What can we do?" a voice called from Alejandro's side. It was Miguel, one of the men who had initially been skeptical. Now his posture spoke of urgency rather than doubt. "Water," Alejandro shouted, already assessing the worst parts of the situation. We need buckets, anything we can use. If we can control this fire now, we might save the park and our homes. As his group sprang into action, he felt that flickering hope reignite. Even in the face of disaster, they rallied. People from different backgrounds, their stories tangled yet distinct, were working side by side. Some dashed back to their homes to fetch buckets, while others sought to pry hoses from neighboring yards. "Keep it low," he could hear another voice shout. The community, rising to the occasion, began to form a human chain to transport water like lifeblood to the flames. But shadows still loomed, and Alejandro knew this was only the beginning. The fire was one enemy, but the challenges they faced extended far beyond it. Each moment spent battling this inferno drew them closer, yet what awaited in the aftermath? As he fought alongside his community, the weight of their dreams pressed against him, a reminder of the stakes. Would they emerge from this stronger, or would the flames swallow their hopes whole? A piercing siren wailed in the distance, the rapid approach of help. Yet there was a gnawing question in the back of Alejandro's mind. What would it take to protect the fragile community they had begun to forge? In that moment of chaos, Alejandro felt the horizon shift. They were becoming more than just survivors. They were creators, defenders of something that had the potential to blossom into greatness. The night would not close softly, and the battle had only begun. But what would happen if the flames subsided but the shadows remained? He was willing to risk it all to keep that flame alive. Alejandro handed a bucket of water to Miguel. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, they understood each other without words. Time was precious. Miguel dashed away, ready to refill. Flames roared, crackling with a fierce appetite. Alejandro's heart raced as he shouted orders. Every drop of water seemed a spark of hope snuffed out. Every face around him echoed the same determination. Neighbors they had never spoken to before now stood side by side, united by a single purpose: to protect what they had built. A woman with frizzed hair and worry lines etched deep in her face handed him a broom. "We need to clear the dry brush," she urged. Alejandro took it, his movements urgent. He began to sweep away the brush that fed the fire, sweat trickling down his spine. The flames danced above him, angry yet strangely illuminating. "Look," someone shouted. "The fire is spreading to the trees." Panic pulsed through the air, and Alejandro's sense of urgency heightened. "Form a line. All of you, move the buckets." He weaved through the frantic crowd, barking commands, his voice cutting through the chaos. Focus. That was the key. They couldn't let fear take hold. They had to channel it into action. A small group, breathing heavily, joined him near a stubborn blaze licking the base of a nearby tree. "Here, use the blankets. Smother it," he yelled, grabbing a worn blanket from a bystander. It was soaked when it hit the ground. They pressed it against the flames, the heat almost unbearable on his skin. Each close encounter made his heart pound harder, a primal fear mixed with adrenaline fueling their mission. The sirens grew louder. The city's heroes were coming. Relief washed over him, but it also brought dread. Would they arrive in time? Would everything they had fought for disappear into ash? "Push harder," yelled Maria, who had returned with her group, faces glowing with determination. She plunged her bucket into the nearby fountain, the water bubbling in defiance of the heat. Alejandro could see the flames retreating bit by bit. They were making a stand, fighting back. But as he fought, a thought nagged at Alejandro. The shadows were not only the fire, they were the underlying tensions, the uneasiness that bubbled between the old residents and newcomers. This beauty, this community spirit, was fragile. What had sparked the flames tonight? With fresh buckets in hand, whispers rippled through those fighting. Some raised fears about the future. What would happen once the flames were extinguished? Would they unite against a common enemy, or fracture under the weight of suspicion? As the fire's advance slowed, Alejandro backed away to catch his breath, wiping his brow. Around him, muffled voices bled into the night, cries of alarm, relief, laughter, and despair, all tangled together in that chaotic symphony. Yet just when he thought hope was beginning to flicker, an ominous shadow loomed again. A thick figure appeared at the edge of the park, hidden in the dark. Alejandro squinted, trying to discern the shape. Who was it? A sudden chill crept along his spine, as an uninvited tension settled in the air, spiraling back his thoughts to the beginnings of tonight's inferno. What secrets were hidden in the heart of the shadows? And could they forge light from the darkness that threatened to engulf them once more? The figure stepped closer, revealing just enough to send Alejandro's heart racing again. Was it a friend or a foe? As the shadows cleared, he caught sight of a wide-brimmed hat, a long coat, and the unmistakable outline of a messenger bag slung low on the figure's hip. For a moment Alejandro froze. He recognized that silhouette. Don Pedro. The name slipped from his lips, a shaky whisper. The old man had been a pillar in the community, yet so often lost in his own memories, stories of the past swirling behind those wise eyes. But hadn't he moved away? Why was he here now? The old man straightened, casting a long shadow across the flames, adding to the growing anxiety. I came as soon as I heard, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. What has happened? It's the fire. It threatened everything. Alejandro gestured toward the roaring blaze, then felt his pulse quickening. But it's slowing down. We're fighting it. Don Pedro glanced around, seeing the chaos and determination on everyone's faces. You have rallied them, Alejandro. They can feel your spirit. His gaze drifted towards the approaching sirens, the wail piercing the air like a sharp knife. But then, a question lingered. What about you? What are you doing here? Alejandro pressed. I carry knowledge, Don Pedro replied firmly. Not just tales of old times, but strategies to fight against flames and fears. Strategies? Alejandro frowned. We already have plans. They are good, yet I know fire. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But I also know how to bring people together. There are flames that burn in hearts, not just in the forest. His eyes flared with a mix of urgency and fervor. Alejandro felt hope stir, a glimmer igniting in his chest. Could the wisdom of years past hold the key to bridging the fractures within their community? Listen. Don Pedro raised his voice to fully command Alejandro's attention. You must lead them beyond this fire. Fear can be even more destructive, and it lingers long after the last ember smolders. This event, it is a flashpoint. You need to unify not just against fire, but against the worries that creep between us. The flames crackled louder, reflecting their urgency. Alejandro met the old man's gaze, feeling the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders. Was he ready to face not just the fire, but the shadows of doubt lurking among his neighbors? Everyone, Alejandro shouted, drawing the remaining crowd's eyes. This fire may threaten our homes, but our hearts, they need to remain strong. We can overcome together, but we have to keep the conversation going. We can't let this create divisions. A murmuring buzz of agreement rippled through the group. Hope surged, rising like the smoke swirling into the night. They gathered closer, eyes meeting with newfound determination, their voices rising a chorus against the darkness. But then, just as the last hints of doubt began to flicker away, a series of shouts erupted from the edge of the park. Look, something's happening. Alejandro turned, the sickening feeling returning. What had they missed? The ground shook slightly beneath them, and the night air, thick with smoke, suddenly turned electric. What was out there? Approaching relentlessly, drawing nearer with every breath. As dread smeared the hope they had built up, the shadows that had lingered now danced menacingly back to life. What was waiting beyond the fire? What truths would unfold in the dark? Alejandro squinted through the smoke, straining to make sense of the chaotic scene unfolding in the distance. Shadows moved like ghosts, flickering in and out of the wavering light cast by the flames. Hearts pounding, the crowd behind him leaned in, caught between fear and curiosity. What is it? Someone whispered. Alejandro felt a wave of anxiety wash over him as he struggled to fight back the rising tide of dread. He wished he could reassure everyone, but uncertainty gripped his throat. Don Pedro stood alongside him, his eyes scanning the horizon. Fear is a powerful force, Alejandro. You must channel that fear into something constructive. Maintain focus. Then, from amidst the haze, a figure emerged, silhouetted against the fiery backdrop. Disbelief washed over Alejandro as he tried to identify the newcomer. The figure stumbled forward, the frantic movements suggesting a desperation that tugged at Alejandro's heart. Flashes of light reflected on the figure's face, illuminating sharp features and wide eyes filled with terror as the figure drew closer. Alejandro's breath caught in his chest. "Maria!" He burst forward, his voice slicing through the anxiety. Maria, his childhood friend, stood before him, hair wild and eyes bright with both fear and determination. "What happened?" he asked, fighting back the swell of relief. The fire spread to the south side. She gasped, her breath coming in short bursts. "They can't control it. People are trapped." The crowd erupted into a mix of gasps and shouts, chaos swirling like the embers dancing above the fire. Alejandro felt a mix of horror and anger swell within him. "How can we help?" Carla and Jorge are leading a group to rescue those stuck in the buildings. "They need more hands." "They need you," she cried, urgency clinging to every word. Without a moment's hesitation, Alejandro turned to Don Pedro, desperation etched into his features. "This needs to be a collective effort. We can't abandon those in danger." "Yes," Don Pedro agreed, his tone grave yet steady. "Fear may paralyze, but united we can act. This is the moment to ignite the fire of our spirit, to turn fear into bravery." Alejandro's heart raced as he rallied the crowd again. "Listen, we need to form a team, get supplies, and help anyone trapped. Every moment counts." Nods of determination spread through the group. They looked to one another, eyes alight with a shared purpose. Alejandro felt that flicker of hope grow bigger, like the flames he was fighting against. The crowd surged forward at his command, gathering whatever they could: a few shovels, buckets, anything to help douse the flames and rescue their neighbors. Pushing through the chaos, Alejandro caught Maria's determined gaze. "Let us go," she said, her tone fierce. Together, they pressed toward the growing inferno, the smoke curling around them, mixing with the scent of ash and sweat. But as they approached the south side, the scene shifted. A fearsome roar echoed in the air, followed by a thunderous crash. An entire building collapsed under the weight of the flames, sending debris flying. The crowd screamed, panicking as a cloud of dust and smoke erupted, clouding their view. Alejandro felt his heart race again. Were they too late? No. Panic threatened to drown him, but he shook his head, forcing himself to focus. "Stay together. We can't lose our will now." Yet in that moment, another loud crash reverberated, sending shivers down their spines. From the shadows emerged figures that were half obscured by the smoke, neither friend nor foe. Who were they? What did this fierce confrontation in the face of the fire mean for their fight? And would courage be enough to protect them from the darkness waiting nearby? Alejandro squinted against the thickening smoke, his heart racing. The sight before him was beyond comprehension. The fire had stolen the south side, consuming everything in its path. The scent of burnt wood mixed with desperation hung heavy in the air. "Is anyone trapped?" he shouted over the chaos, trying to maintain clarity. Maria was at his side. "We need to find Carla and Jorge. They've already gone in." He nodded, steeling himself. The roar of the flames sounded like a wild beast, fierce and unstoppable. Behind him, the faces of his friends were strained with worry, but amidst that unease, he saw a flicker of adrenaline. People were ready to act. They were not going to let fear claim their spirits. "Follow me," Alejandro called, charging toward the collapsed building. Maria's hand was firm on his arm, pushing him forward. "Stick together. Don't get separated." As they ran, the ash rained down like a gray snow, making it hard to breathe. They arrived at the ruins of what had once been a bustling restaurant. Cinders spiraled up, and the cracked walls appeared to lean dangerously. Alejandro scanned the wreckage, heart pounding. Screams echoed from within, hoarse and filled with pain. His guts twisted. Somewhere in there, someone was alive. He could feel it. With a deep breath, he turned to the group that had followed him. Carla and Jorge went searching for people. We need to find them, and if we can't, we have to help anyone we can. Do you understand? A chorus of nods, all resolute. Let us move. He pushed forward, his pulse roaring in his ears. They navigated through the fallen debris, the heat burning against their skin. Suddenly, a cry rang out, a voice trembling through the waves of heat. Help! Someone, please! Over here! A woman's voice, desperate. Alejandro's instincts kicked in. This way. He led the group toward the sound. They reached a small opening just big enough to crawl through. Alejandro, pushing aside his fear, squeezed inside. The darkness engulfed him. I'm coming, he yelled, searching for the source of the pleas. The turmoil of smoke thickened, hazing him, making it difficult to see. Stay calm, he shouted into the abyss, trying to project confidence. Even as doubts crept in. To his right, a figure lay trapped beneath a beam. Alejandro's heart dropped. I'm here. He scrambled forward, signaling Maria and a strong man from the group. Together, they worked to lift the beam. The woman's cries intensified. They forced themselves to push higher, the weight of the beam feeling heavier as panic set in. On three, Alejandro grunted. 1, 2, 3. They lifted with what felt like the last of their strength. The beam groaned, and for a moment, Alejandro feared they wouldn't make it. But suddenly, with a loud creak, it shifted and rolled away. An elderly woman, frail and terrified, weakly crawled out from under the wreckage. Her sunken eyes met Alejandro's, and for a moment, everything else faded. Thank you, she whispered, tears streaming down her scarred cheeks. Get her out, Alejandro shouted, urgency pressing against every nerve. The heat closed in around them, and as others rushed to help the woman, he turned, noting the ceiling's ominous sag. We need to move, he urged, heart hammering as they quickly educated the woman to safety. But when he emerged back on the street, the chaos outside intensified. The crowd that had stood behind him was now scattered, fear threading through them. Amidst the panic, Alejandro caught sight of Jorge, urging people back. Alejandro, he yelled. There's too much smoke. It's spreading. We have to evacuate. But he couldn't leave yet. Not when they still had friends inside. It wasn't just a burning building. It was home, a part of their lives. Get everyone out. I'll find Carla, Alejandro cried, determination hardening every fiber of his being. Are you crazy? Jorge shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. We can't go back. It's too risky. We don't leave anyone behind. Alejandro's voice rang clear, filled with a burning passion. As he turned back toward the collapsing inferno, there was no turning back now. But with the roar of fire at his back, he knew something was waiting for him, something that would test not only their resolve but their very spirit. Would he be strong enough to face the darkness within and protect those he loved? As Alejandro pushed deeper into the shadows of the smoldering wreckage, he could hear his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Each breath was a struggle against the thick, acrid smoke swirling around him. But he couldn't stop now, not when lives were at stake. Memories flooded his mind, faces of his children, of Maria, and of all the others who had dared to hope alongside him. Fear was not an option. With renewed determination, he called out for Carla. Carla, can you hear me? Silence answered, but Alejandro refused to let despair take root. He pressed forward, searching the darkness for anything that could give him hope. Moments turned to an eternity, but finally, another cry pierced the chaos. Here, over here. It was faint, but unmistakable. He raced towards the sound, adrenaline coursing through his veins. As he emerged into a small clearing filled with debris, there she was, Carla, trapped beneath an overturned table, her face pale and strained. Hold on. I'm coming, he shouted, dropping to his knees and assessing the scene. Desperation clawed at him as he enlisted the help of a fellow rescuer who had followed him in. Together, they began to lift the heavy table, sweat pooling on their brows as the heat intensified around them. Just a little more, Alejandro grunted, focusing on Carla's terrified gaze. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, a spark lit up within him. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves. With a final push, the table crashed to the side, revealing Carla's trembling frame. "Thank you," she gasped, scrambling to her feet. But there was no time for relief. The heat was unbearable now. They could feel it licking at their skin. Instinctively, Alejandro grabbed Carla's hand. "Let us go," he urged, leading her towards the exit they had come from. Navigating the chaos, his mind raced with thoughts of those waiting outside the growing crowd, the unity they had begun to forge. As they emerged from the smoke into the cool night air, a wave of relief washed over him. But it was short-lived. Alejandro quickly scanned the crowd for Maria, his heart tightening when he didn't immediately spot her. "Jorge," he yelled, spotting his friend directing people away from the flames. "Where's Maria?" She was leading another group to help evacuate some families. Jorge responded, urgency alighting his eyes. She got trapped in the back. There's been a collapse." Panic surged, igniting fear within him. "I can't leave her," Alejandro shouted, his voice strained and desperate. His gaze flicked from Jorge to the flames that still licked hungrily at the night sky. "We have to go back." Before Jorge could protest, Alejandro turned and ran toward the danger, heart pounding. "Maria," he cried, desperate to hear her voice. The smoke stung his eyes, but he pressed through the haze, each step heavy with the weight of love and fear as he ventured back into the heart of chaos. Time seemed to slow, and panic gripped him again. Would he find her? "Maria," he shouted once more, praying for hope amidst the cacophony of destruction. The fire crackled fiercely, seeming to taunt him with every step he took. Then, against the roar of the flames, he caught a faint whimper, echoing through the darkness. "Alejandro," his heart soared. "I'm here." He followed the sound, moving with desperation. There she was, tucked behind a wall of rubble, tears streaming down her face, but framed with an undeniable warmth. "Get away from there," he urged, rushing to her side. "We have to move." Maria's eyes were filled with fear and relief as she grasped his arm. "I thought you wouldn't come back." "I would never leave you," he replied fervently. "We're in this together." Just as he helped her to her feet, the structure shuddered, and a deafening noise ripped through the air. The wall behind them began to cave, sending a cascade of debris their way. With little time to react, Alejandro threw himself in front of Maria, shielding her as they stumbled forward, propelled by adrenaline. "Move," he shouted. Together they pushed through the thick air, emerging again into night, gasping for breath, tears of relief and exhaustion mingling. Once outside, Alejandro didn't look back. The flames flickered cruelly behind them, but it didn't matter. They had made it out, hand in hand, their hearts intertwined like the very fabric of their community as they stepped away from the inferno. Alejandro scanned the sea of familiar faces. Carla, Jorge, the critics who had once doubted him, now standing together, united in purpose. Everything they had fought for flickered in those eyes. "Look what we've done," Jorge exclaimed, tears mixing with soot on his face. They had risen above the fear together as a family. Alejandro's heart swelled as they gathered around him. Fear may have ignited the flames, but hope had sparked the revival of their community. "We may still face challenges," Alejandro said, gathering everyone's attention. "But look around. We're not alone. From ashes, we can build something beautiful, a home for everyone. A place woven together by our stories." Hope ignited within the group, a flame they wouldn't allow to be extinguished, and so, with a community bound by shared struggles and strength, rising from the depths of despair, Alejandro knew this was only the beginning. Together they would build an empire not of bricks and mortar, but of kindness, resilience, and love. As dawn broke over Maplewood, the smoke began to dissipate, revealing a new day, a canvas ready for their dreams to paint bright. Now is the time to act. You need to subscribe now to our channel. Don't miss the next exclusive stories and transformations like Alejandro's. Hit that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach those who need to hear this message. Comment below and share your reactions. Let us know how this journey impacted you. And remember, don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this incredible transformation. Only true fans understand how important it is to support the channel through these actions. Let's keep the flame of hope alive together.